Hello, Facebook. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in your world or in the part of the globe. Welcome to the Special Needs Community live TV show. We focus on conversations that matter in the special needs and disabilities world. Our conversations focus on challenges as well as the wins families and children experience in dealing with different. And along the way, we hope to inspire, encourage, and provide both useful and helpful information. So join us, share your challenges, inspirations, and aspirations, and let's spread awareness. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm your host and producer, Bridgetti, Banda, and I'm going to say a warm, hearty welcome to my co-host, Mary. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Bridgetti. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, and yourself?
Yes, I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful but cold day here where I am. And you look like it's warm where you are, but it's literally warm where you are, isn't it?
It's slightly on the chilly side today, but
Okay.
but it's still very pleasant. Could you move your camera just a little bit so I can see less of the ceiling and a bit more of your face? So
Absolutely.
we can see you a little better.
So
Fantastic.
we didn't do
Great.
that beforehand, did we?
I know. Won't you quickly introduce yourself and tell people why you're passionate about this topic?
Okay, so I'm Mary Elizabeth Jackson. I am a mother of three. I am an advocate for special needs. I'm also a children's author. I am very passionate about advocacy work, but the special needs world, disability world, because it's a it's a very big part of my life. And so I have two kids that I've had to advocate for along the special needs. I guess you want to call it spectrum and journey and things like that. I've also had to advocate for my older daughter with medical issues that were not on the spectrum. But it doesn't really matter because we're advocates as parents. The instant our children are born, we become advocates, and especially if they're born with special needs or any kind of disability or extra needs that they have, we become their advocate and voice. So because it's so much a part of my life, pretty much, well, it's every day. So I'm very passionate about spreading the awareness, helping people to understand that it's not something to be afraid of if you don't have a child who has a need and you have a neurotypical child. It is something that Bridgetti and I hope to spread awareness, but also information, because the more research you need to do or have to do, the more empowered you can be, the better parent you can be. And that's a win-win for you and your child, right?
Yes, absolutely. And today is special, and I think I also want to let people know, you and I have been doing the show, The Conversation, and we started this conversation, this topic on special needs, and we decided that it needs a space of its own because it's such a incredibly important conversation, and just talking about it 2 or 3 times really doesn't do the conversation justice. And so we've decided to start an entire series spent on special needs, and we've started a new Facebook page for it. So essentially, we're starting a whole show on special needs. And why today is special is because this is Autism Month, and tomorrow is World Autism Awareness Day. So that's a global event, World Autism Day. And I don't know if you can expand a little bit on it, but it's interesting to note that when people think of autism, they think of the autistic disorder, but yet, from what I've seen, there's apparently 3 different types of autism spectrum disorders. So the other one is Asperger's syndrome, and then there's also pervasive development disorder, also known as atypical autism. So these are aspects of the autism spectrum that we may not be aware of. And the UN Secretary General, for example, says that on World Autism Awareness Day, they want to make sure that we reaffirm, or they reaffirm, their commitment to promote the full participation of all people, everyone in autism, and also to ensure that they have the necessary support that that enable them to exercise their rights and their fundamental freedom. And I think that's pretty important.
It's extremely important, extremely. I have a girlfriend who she has two children with disabilities, and one of them has spent a lot of time in a wheelchair. And the city that she lives in, that's near me, she's an advocate mom too. We met through trying to change the law in the state of Tennessee to better classroom settings for our kids. And so I wanted to share this with you, but hadn't had the chance to. She actually has gone to businesses in her town and made sure they were compliant with ADA law, because there were still, here we are, like 2017, 2018, and there were still businesses in her city that were not compliant for people in wheelchairs, and she was appalled. So being a mom, having to maneuver with her child and wanting to go out and do things and participate in life and all that stuff, like the rest of us want to do as well, she could not believe that there were places that still she couldn't get in and out of with her child in a wheelchair. So, she was kind of a trailblazer in her town in the last couple of years, going in and, basically saying, you're not compliant with law and you need to change that, So, and I dealt with that this last year with my oldest going to college and being in a wheelchair, having crutches. And the school was not totally compliant in the area where we needed it to be for her, but they were very, very helpful, and they changed that and were very, welcoming to the situation and accommodating. And it was very, that was empowering on both wins. It was a win-win situation. So it's very important for us to share the awareness about this, because, I always say it's not like we're going to stop having kids come into the world that are going to have special needs. That's not going to stop all of a sudden. Maybe someday in the future, they'll find ways to help with it so there's not as many, or there's not as many children who have challenges, because they're going to change. Medicine will change tremendously, hopefully, over the next 100 years. But at this point where we are right now, we have to deal with what it is. And it's not a disease. It's not catching. It doesn't mean someone's weird or bad parenting or any of those things. It is a neurological thing that happens, and along with other things, sometimes it is things that happen during birth and, during the gestational growth of the baby. And so, it's important for everyone possible that can be aware to be more kind about it, to be more helpful. I have friend moms who are single moms raising kids like this, and it is an unbelievable stress that they go through. And so go ahead.
I can, I think it's one of those things that as a parent, you may not consider until you have a special needs child, or until someone in your family has a special needs child. Yes. I just want to remind our viewers, if you are currently watching the show and you realize we are not seeing your comments, we can only see your comments if you are on the Facebook page. It'll be www.facebook.com/specialneeds.tv. So if you're following the show, if you're watching the show anywhere else, you are able to view the show, but we will not be able to see your live comments. So please go to www.facebook.com/specialneeds.tv, and that way we'll be able to see your comments live and be able to show them on screen and participate in the conversation. So Mary, yes, just picking up on what you were saying, it is amazing how that many times moms especially become advocates for their children, because it's not something that a mom plans for. No mother plans to bring a child into the world that has special needs, and usually it knocks you for a six, and you do everything that you possibly can to educate yourself. And that's when you more often than not discover that the world isn't really a friendly place for people that are differently abled. And more so because, so many, and Mary, it's not just in the US.
No,
It's
it's a
it's it's
global.
it's everywhere. It's a globally, it's a problem. You know, if you look at the condition of sidewalks, pavements, for example, if they're not well maintained, they are no longer wheelchair accessible or friendly.
Absolutely.
If
It's
they
really
don't
sad,
have
isn't
a
it?
it really something simple as that, you know. I mean, I take myself, for example, you know, I live with a disability myself, and I'm
Mhm.
finding that if I can't walk on a surface that is 100% flat, it hurts my back. You know,
Mm,
it's painful for me to walk in a road that's uneven, and that happens sometimes. For example, when you have roots growing underneath the road, you don't realize it if you don't have a disability. But if the minute you have a curve in the road, it's painful for me, and that makes it inaccessible for someone in a wheelchair as well. You
mhm.
know, so I become
Absolutely.
acutely aware of the difficulties that people may have in wheelchairs, not being able to reach a button. You know, if there's if you get to a sliding door and it doesn't open automatically with a wheelchair, you can't open it yourself. You know, if there's a
Mhm.
button you need to push to get across, there's so many nuances that makes the world an inaccessible or an unfriendly place to people with challenges.
Well, and not only that, Bridgetti, it also I posted this 2 days ago. I think it was 2 days ago. I went on a little complaint post in a group that I'm with because in traveling this last week because we were traveling. With your children who have sensory issues, like my guy does. Okay, so the bathroom is an extremely unfriendly place for a child who has sensory issues. The toilets flush too loudly, and the dryers are monstrously loud. So it is almost it's so difficult to get a child into a bathroom like that, and they have to use the restroom. So my post was like, who do we talk to? Who can we complain to? Who can we get to fix these noises for children, our kids, adults, anyone who has sensory issues? And I was reminded of it repeatedly every single day as we were traveling this last week because you have to leave. And some friends reminded me, okay, this is what we do and this is what I do, and I always take paper towels with me, and some really great suggestions. One mom posted replied back, and she says she takes sticky notes and she puts it on the sensor on the toilet, so the toilet will not flush until she takes it off and they're out of the restroom, which is wonderful. It's a great idea. And one
Wow.
mom, yeah, I was like, that's brilliant. And another mom was like, well, we just use hand sanitizer. We just get in and get out as quick as we can and stuff. And that's fine. It's amazing how parents with children, whatever their needs are, we have to accommodate to the world as opposed to the world accommodating to us. And that is no longer, I think, appropriate in many instances. And so you and I are, April is the month of awareness for autism, and tomorrow is the World Autism Awareness Day. And so, we're trying to be a part of that and spread that word of awareness and acceptance of it. Because acceptance of it is very, well, we have to, there's no choice but to accept it. It's not going anywhere. It's not going away at this point right now. So, where I live, autism, when a child is diagnosed as autistic, they have level 1, 2, and 3, like you were talking about the differences. And it's interesting because in the 10, 12 years that I have been, 13, 14 years, I've been, dealing with spectrum issues with children. The diagnosis has changed very much. The way they diagnose children has changed tremendously over that time period. So, you do have your high functioning Asperger's children, and then you have your pervasive developmental delay, which that was one of the diagnoses my middle daughter had with NOS, which is non other specified. So sometimes it's very hard to diagnose a child when they're young because it's like you see strengths and you see weaknesses. So testing does take a very long time. I know that with my son, we spent 5-6 hours testing just to come up with exactly what was happening. So that's not the end of the world, but it is some of those testing time periods can be very long, especially even if it's done during this, through the school system. That takes, they have 60 days to get all that done. So waiting on a diagnosis for education, help, and accommodations to be made, it's all pretty lengthy,
So there's basically nothing quick about it, and I think it can be very daunting for a new mom. What would your suggestions be for a mom if she is when a mom is embarking on this journey of discovery? What would your suggestions be in terms of coping mechanisms?
Well, that's a big question, because there are a lot of coping mechanisms and skills that you can use and tools that you can use. I think for a parent, now, if a child is in utero and there's a problem, you have that time period to kind of maybe mentally prepare yourself. It doesn't mean that when the baby comes out and you start on that journey, it doesn't mean that it's any easier for the parent, even though they have had that information ahead of time. They can educate themselves, they can go to specialists, they can have all that support that they need. But say your child is born and they seem barely going on the normal path of growth, and then all of a sudden there's a change that happens, or they don't hit milestones, and you start to notice something, or the daycare starts to notice something, and then you go into the pediatrician or whoever you go in for testing, and there comes back a diagnosis. I think at that point most parents are in shock. No one ever wants to hear that there's something wrong with their child. And so you need to seek out support in any way that you can as a parent, caregiver, whoever it is. Do your research, talk to your doctor, talk to the specialist, find out who you need to go see. And remember that as hard as it is on you, it's even harder on the child who's experiencing it and going through it. So we have to be their rock, and we have to be those answers for that child, and making life better for them, So I would say the first thing you need to do is talk to your doctor and find out every bit of information you can about it. Research it on your own. Find a specialist to see all everything that you need to do for that child. You will need to keep a notebook. You might need to keep a diary. You need to keep yourself organized, and you need to call on support from every aspect of your life: family, friends, neighbors, church members, whoever. I don't know I hope that's helpful, because I'm trying to think of everything that a mom or dad or caregiver needs, but it's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things in order to make things work, because some children with special needs have many different doctors. I went through that with my little guy.
That's an aspect that people may not be prepared for.
Right.
It's really not just one specialist. It's a whole team of specialists. And that opens a whole new can of worms, being the accessibility to healthcare. Mm-hmm. And the availability of funds or the lack of funds, and being able to care for your special needs child. And if you don't have access to free healthcare, or that free healthcare is inaccessible, it opens up a whole new world of frustration in addition to this new challenge that you've got. And I think it's especially hard for parents who don't have access to healthcare.
Right. It's really hard. And, parents have to remember something. It's not their fault. It's not something they did to their child. It is something that they were born with, or it's, like if you get into genetics and all that stuff, the environment was right. And then the genes were turned on because the environment and the body was right. It's like, even as older, you and I we're older, right? So we don't have to have all the things that our parents had, but those genes are in everyone's body, and in certain environments will turn different genes on. So one thing parents have to do is, because I think there's a lot of guilt that happens for parents with children with disabilities. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What could I have done different? Things like that. And we have that you need you need solace for that. Even if you have to go and see a therapist or a counselor about it and talk to your pastor, someone, you have to make peace with that. And you just have to, you have to keep it together for your child.
Yeah. And, I think that also opens up a whole new conversation about your support at home. What if you're a single parent and you have a special needs child? Or what if you have a special needs child and your partner is not an involved or a hands-on parent? Being a parent of a relatively normal and able-bodied child is difficult enough if you don't have a hands-on parent. But I think it can be especially challenging if you now have a partner who's uninvolved, and generally it's the mom that doesn't have a choice. There's no off button to parenting.
No.
And
doesn't matter where your child is. It doesn't matter what kind of kid you have. There's no off button. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, it can be especially challenging if you have a special needs child. And I think, your mother hen instincts kind of kicks in, which does anyway if you have a child. But I think it may be heightened if you have a special needs child, and you may have difficulty trusting anyone else to care for your child as well as you do. And
that's
that
a whole
adds a whole
subject
complexity as well.
Yeah, that's a whole nother beast there, because parents don't have the option of going out. Most parents with children that have needs do not have that support. And then it's also scary to leave your child with someone else. It's scary to take your child to school and leave them in the care of someone else who doesn't know everything about them, maybe doesn't soothe them the same way or react to them the same way or love them like you do. Nobody loves your child like you do. So, it's so much harder to leave your child with someone and go out. And then parents tend to feel guilty when they do get time out, oh, what if my child needs me, and whatever else they may be thinking. So that is a whole conversation in itself. And finding out what your legal rights are and what your, how to empower yourself. And there's so much to all of this. It really does become a full-time job as a parent with children that have needs. That's how my life feels to me. My kids are not just my kids. They're also my job. And I say that with love. I don't say that like I'm detached from it. I'm saying that it is something that I work on. I have to work with every day of my life.
It's your everyday occupation. It's
Absolutely
what you occupy yourself with, and it becomes your focus and your dedication. But just bringing it back again to autism and tomorrow being World Autism Day, the United Nations also focuses on the rights of people with disabilities, including autism, and it's enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and therefore it's part of the mandate of the UN. And so the UN says that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities acknowledges the instrumental role of assistive technologies in enabling persons with disabilities to exercise their rights and freedoms. Thank goodness for technology and the advances that we've made these days. And so it says that in terms of technology, it obligates states that are party to the convention to promote availability and use of technologies at an affordable cost, to facilitate access to them, and to undertake or promote research and development into such new technologies. And while technological advances are continuous, there are still major barriers to the use of assistive technologies, including high costs, lack of availability, lack of awareness and its potential, and also the lack of training in their use. And they further say that available data indicates that several developing countries, more than 50% of people who live with disabilities who need assistive devices are not able to receive them. That's a large volume of people who can't receive assistance. And so what they've undertaken to do, so they've undertaken to address through conversations and discussions with self-advocates and experts. They will address topics such as the internet and digital communities and leveling the playing field for everyone. They will also discuss independent living in terms of smart home technology. They also undertake to discuss education and employment in terms of communication and executive functioning. And then they will also open up the conversation on opening doors to healthcare for all, and then also the right to be heard, for political participation and advocacy. So it's great to see that the UN is making a concerted effort to address this. And very often, I think, in every country, in every community, we are so reliant on local government to help us to make life more accessible for everyone. Now, something I've learned recently or a while ago from someone who's differently abled is that you get areas or buildings or communities that are that are enabling for disabled people, or that are friendly towards disabled people, and there's a difference between the two. And I think, at some point we need to invite someone onto our show to delve more into the two differences of a city being friendly or fully accessible to people with disabilities. And I mean, the thing that you mentioned, for example, with sensory issues. Now, I have sensory issues myself. I also, like your little guy, I don't like loud noises. It irritates me terribly. And I never used to understand why, fortunately, we've had so many advances now in technology and in medicine and in awareness, things that wasn't available when I was younger. Now, it was interesting for me to note, for example, that it's only the 12th year in which we are having world awareness for autism. So yes, there are advantages, and having a World Autism Day and a World Autism Month, which is what the autism community is doing. They're having the entire month of April to highlight autism. And so those are advances we want to be thankful for. I used to wonder why, I traveled by train when I first started working many, many years ago. And I used to wonder why I felt so irritated in the train, and I didn't realize it was the sound of the train that underlying noise was irritating me. And I never knew that.
Well, it means a lot of what happens with children who are on the spectrum of autism, their nervous system is immature and it's overstimulated, and there's a lot of toxins in the body that happen through the foods that we eat and the air that we breathe and the stuff that we drink and during birth and all those things. And so it overstimulates everything in the nervous system and the brain. So at some point we'll have a conversation about detoxification of the body and how it changes a lot of symptoms for children on the spectrum. It's very fascinating, but we do want to continue this conversation. I know we're out of time. We could go on and on and on. I know I'm looking at the clock and it's already 10 and it's like, wow, we just started, didn't we? But we just want to continue the awareness, and we also want, I truly believe that these kiddos, one of the reasons they have these abilities that they do have is to help us see the world differently. And it really does allow us to see differently. I look at life, I would never have seen life the way I do if my kids had just had no issues, and no special needs at all. I would never have seen any of this. And it's beautiful. It makes you, I believe, a deeper person in the sense that you have to go in, and even though you are an advocate for your children, you have to do work on yourself as well. It makes you have to dive deep into yourself to survive, to get through it, because you have to have resiliency, So go ahead.
Absolutely. We need to end the show. We're completely out of time. I
I
want to say thank you to
know.
everyone who's watched us live today. Thank you to everyone who's watching the show on the replay. If you've enjoyed the content, please go out and do share the show. We really would like
Yes.
as many people as possible to see it, to spread awareness. And remember, tomorrow, the 2nd of April, is World Autism Day. Mary and I will be back again next week, same time, same place, to have more conversations about special needs. And I wanted to say a huge big thank you for joining us today. So from me, Bridgetti and Banda in Cape Town, South Africa, it's goodbye for now.
And from me, Mary Elizabeth Jackson in Tennessee, it's goodbye. And go check out Om Mama on Instagram, OMMOMMA. And I have an interview this week with her about this subject that'll be posting this week. So she's a really great lady. So,
Bye, everyone.
bye.